Welcome to the Energizing America podcast, where we talk all things energy, why we need it in business, communities, and our life. Sitting down with Chad today, we're going to talk finance, everyone's favorite topic. You ready?
Right. Yes, I'm absolutely ready. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming in. Let's see, Chad, you've been with us not quite a year?
Yeah, it's been about 9 months as a full-time employee. I joined the board about a year and 3-4 months ago.
Okay.
So I was on the board for the Wescom board of directors for about 6 months before I transitioned into a full-time employee.
So this far in, are you quite surprised what you saw once you pulled back the curtain and dove in as a full-time employee?
Definitely quite surprised. A whole different industry that I'm used to. So I started in retail. I was in retail finance for almost 11 years, and then was in medical finance for about a year and a half, and then oil and gas for the last 9 months, which it's been interesting. It's been quite the transition, but it's been good. It's been a interesting, historical, exciting time to be in the industry.
For sure. I mean, you came right as COVID was kind of coming to an end, but you were on the board during COVID.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So what's the big difference between retail and oil and gas?
I think it's the price per barrel drives a lot of what oil and gas is. Where retail was an interesting industry as well when I was in it, just because it was transitioning from brick and mortar to online. So everybody was trying to figure out what that looked like, from how many stores should you have versus how much of your investment should be in technology and online sales.
Oh, yeah.
So it was a ever-changing industry, it seemed like. I think I see the same within oil and gas, but it's different because the drivers are different.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that attracted us when we were trying to nominate some board members, if I recall correctly, is we appreciated the fact that you had not only finance background, but being in a dynamic industry, something that's not stable and has a lot of change, like retail, has a lot of the same elements of oil and gas, where there's a lot of change ongoing, right? Whatever, like you called a driver, the widget might be different, you
Right.
know, the impact of it. But the reality is the oil and gas industry continues to be under a siege, both from an administration perspective, just a social, economical, that dynamic. And then also the fact is we have to go through a transition in our energy industry, and renewables are more of a mix. So we certainly were attracted to your flexibility in that change. From a finance perspective, we still deal with month-end close. We
Right.
still deal with budgets and forecasts.
Yep.
Same thing, right?
Yeah. So, numbers are numbers, right? It's just like you said, the widget is a little bit different. You add on the complexities of supply chain, which we had a little bit of that in retail with a lot of the stuff coming through the ports, a lot of the clothing coming through the ports, and some of those delays. And quite honestly, within retail, if you have a ship sitting out at sea for 3 weeks, you may miss the peak season to sell your product,
Which has got to be awful.
which is awful. Yeah. So, but it seems like we deal with those same complexities right now within oil and gas, within probably every industry with supply chain. Right?
Yeah, it certainly feels like it. But
Yeah.
we're starting to see it not only just affect our ability to do well financially, but it's affecting our operations, which then, of course, does impact finance as well.
Right.
I mean, what did we just got done with our latest forecast.
Yeah.
We did one last month.
Right.
What do you call it? A 4+8 last month, and now we did a 5+7.
Yep. 4 months of actuals, 8 months of forecast. Now this month we had 5 months of actual, 7 months of forecast.
And
Yep.
in 1 month, what did we see? A swing in revenue of 5%
Yeah.
forecast,
Yeah.
anyways, by
Yeah.
year end.
Yeah.
Maybe was it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Regardless, it's in 1 month we're seeing that we could have a 5% swing in our opinion as to what the future brings.
Right.
That's got to be wild.
It is, and what's the main driver, right? I mean, we're kicking jobs out, and it's because we can't get product, and some of it is employees. You're trying to fill positions and delays in doing that, but it's the main driver it seems to be just the environment we're in right now with supply chain.
Yeah, we've had some conversation about inflation and how it's impacting our financials, but really the impact of inflation is less of an issue than the supply chain issues. Do you feel like right now that it seems like that's what we're
Yeah,
up against?
I think that's the biggest headwind we have right now. Yeah, for
Because
sure.
with inflation, our producers are getting more per barrel, but if they can't get the material and they can't get the supplies, I don't care what the administration does. And I actually was just reading a letter from one of the oil producers that wrote to President Biden saying, like, that's fine, we'll be happy to sit down with your team, but until you change your attitude towards our industry, there's nothing more we can do.
Yeah, why would we invest,
With-
right? Why would we dump our capital into the industry if the administration doesn't support the industry and is going to regulate it?
People demand a return on their investment, right?
Yep.
So if I can't get that return, I'm going to go invest my dollars elsewhere. You know, you guys, your finance team has really done a superb job of trying to help us figure out how we had this 100% electrical, 100% in the Bakken. As a business, allegedly, you can't do that. It's not long-term sustainability.
Yep.
We recognized that back in 2016 with the slowdown, or 15, 16. So we've been strategically trying to diversify our client base, our mix of services we offer, and then also where we offer them.
Sure.
And finance has really been working hard to get the numbers down for us and figure this out. I just saw a report came out this morning that you put together, your team, and it showed the environmental piece of our business. I think year to date, 8% of our hours have been in environmental, compared to we budgeted only 3% of our
Right.
hours, if I
Yep.
remember.
Yep.
Somewhere
Yep.
along that.
Yep.
The only reason why that comes is from regulation.
Right.
You know,
Right.
the producers aren't going to spend that money on something that isn't regulated. And
Right.
some of it, they agree with the regulation. I'm not saying it's all bad regulation.
Yep.
But if the administration doesn't understand how much more the oil and gas industry is doing for the environment, then they're not going to get the additional investment.
Right. Yeah.
It's
Like
not-
we've talked about, we want to swim in clean water and we want to fish in clean lakes and rivers. And so we do care about the environment. Right?
Yeah.
So,
Wescommer's 100% all in. And you've been out in the Bakken with us. You've went
Yep.
to New Mexico with
Yep.
us. You've went to some of those compressor stations we're working on out of the Twin Ports area throughout the country. Every single person you meet, not just within Wescom, but at these stations and our clients, and they're all into the environment. You can't find a more hunting and fishing group than the oil and gas
right.
industry.
Agreed. Right.
So it's quite interesting
Yeah.
when it comes to that. So you came on board as our CFO. You came from the board on an internal employee. We've done a fair amount of initiatives since you've joined our team.
We have. Yeah.
And they've worked out great. One of which was, back in 13, 14 when we started out, we had no way to pay our bills. And our AR was going from, maybe 100,000 to 200,000, up to 400, up to 500,000. Those were the days, and
Right.
your payroll's climbing up weekly. You've seen what our net terms are in
Right.
the oil and gas industry. They're not real
They're
favorable,
not.
are they?
They're not fantastic. No, they're not.
What are we running roughly on average? Do you have any idea on net? Is it about net 45, 50 days to pay on average? I know some of our guys are.
As far as AR,
Yeah.
I would say even a little bit more than that.
Okay.
Yeah, most of our MSAs are signed at net 60. So.
Yeah, that's right. And actually, when we got this latest financing package, when we moved banks, we did an analysis, and I think it showed net 58.
Yeah.
58 days on
Yeah.
average for our AR. So, there's, we had that factoring business, and anyone
Yes.
who listens to this deal and is in the oil and gas has probably heard about factoring.
And they get a stomach ache. thinking
Yeah, they
about
get,
it.
well, if they don't, they haven't done their homework.
Right.
Or they start ralphing.
Right.
They go
Right.
straight from stomachache to puking. But I think that was a 22 to 24% annual percentage rate that you're paying at least. And what a hank! You got to keep track of each individual invoice. Technically, your client owns, or the bank owns your invoice. So now they're negotiating with the client if it gets too late, too many days behind, and that is a tough way to do business. At the time, with the ownership group we had and the growth we were under, it was just the easiest way to get things
Right.
done.
Yep.
And the oil and gas industry at that time in 2014 was a whole entire different industry than what it was today. So it worked. And hey, you know what, Chad? I learned, I don't know, you went to school for accounting. Did you learn a single thing about factoring?
No.
I didn't either.
Nope.
So when I heard this word factoring, I'm thinking, what in the world, right? I learned so much through that experience. I learned how money flows in the real world with high return demanding investors out of California.
Right.
They're the ones who are behind that factoring. And so I don't regret that experience
Right.
at all
Yep.
about factoring. It cost a lot of money, but hey, at the time we could charge a lot, and it all worked out. We went from the factoring business to we got a small line of credit during the downturn with a local bank, and that worked out for a while. Then we saw the upswing happen in 17 again and started being more strategic and expanded into the Permian. At that time, well, now how are we going to pay our bills, right? And we went back to factoring for about a year, and it was 3 times worse than the first time because now we have more clients and we're across more areas.
Right.
So then, thankfully, ran into a different program called Asset-Based Lending Program, a really good bank out of the East Coast that helped us finance our AR. And that was overall, a really good situation for us, I felt like.
A definite improvement from the factoring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, rates weren't super attractive. I think on an APR, we were probably looking at more 12 to 14%.
Right. Yep.
But again, we could build that into our rates because the oil industry gets it. They love to pay net 60 or net 45, and they understand that costs money.
And necessary to operate from a cash flow perspective.
Well, unless we don't, and when you first came on the board, we had conversations about this. We could change our mission. We could not be out to energize America, but if we're out to energize America and we want to do this in a sustainable way where our employees have a good future ahead of them, then we have to have growth. And we got to be at a certain size. And in order to do so, that means either everyone's going to have to throw in tons of money, including the employees, to finance this AR, or we're just going to have to acknowledge the reality of it. And, there's some business models out there that don't ever have a line of credit, don't ever finance a single thing, and I believe me, if I was a one-man band or even 10 employees, that's where I would be.
Right.
I'm not a fan of financing.
Right.
The thing I've tried to coach our board into through the years and our leadership team is less concerned about if you have a line of credit and more concerned about what your equity is.
Right. Yep.
Because at the end of the day, that's when people are reviewing their financials, it doesn't matter if you have factoring or if you have asset-based lending program, if you have a traditional line of credit or if you have sheer cash. That doesn't mean anything. What matters is what are your assets minus your liabilities, what is that equity balance?
Right. Yep.
Don't you feel?
Yep, I agree, 100%.
But there's certainly operational things within there that can impact. So we go to the asset-based lending program, more flexibility. We still own the invoice. We still have to track it. And then you came on board, and we started meeting with some banks, and we found a bank here in the Twin Ports that was able to give us a big enough line of credit.
A traditional line of credit. No, it's been fantastic. Been a fantastic relationship, and it was quite honestly too easy. It seemed a lot easier than we ever anticipated it would be.
Well, almost. So I try not to live a life of regrets, and instead, my wife's grandpa always said, "Live a life of experience,
Right.
don't live a life of regrets." But the experience there is that if you feel like your business is in a good spot, it is, and go talk to people.
Yeah, right.
I was almost like, man, that's a huge number. We could never go pull this off, and I mean, I don't know. Our AR is in the several millions anymore,
Right.
just
Yep.
with the amount of business we do.
Yep.
And it didn't feel like people would give. I thought you have to be like something cool and know what you're doing. We're just a bunch
Right.
of rednecks
Just
over here.
Don't give ourselves enough credit.
Yeah, I think that's what it is.
Right.
You don't.
Yeah.
Of course, it's easier to give that credit if you transfer it to the employees.
Right.
But
Right.
so the traditional line of credit went, and I think I just opened up some mail where 4.75% on a traditional
Yeah.
line of credit from an APR perspective. We got to be seeing a nice improvement to our bottom
Yeah,
line with
absolutely. Yeah, we did. We seen a nice improvement when we started that traditional line of credit starting in last October. It's eating up a little bit with the interest rates going up, but still we're
this. Well, and just the overall ease of dealing with a traditional line of credit versus this asset-based lending program where you're
Right.
uploading invoices
Yep.
or factoring where you're tracking. Have you guys seen a efficiency in your department over that?
absolutely. Yep. So I transfer money back and forth. It could be a few times a week, and at the end of every month, I upload the financials to their
Portal or
portal,
whatever?
and they tell us how much we have available based on our AR balance for the next month, and it's
And we feel comfortable with it,
Yeah,
right? It's
yeah.
not like we're hitting our credit limit ever, from what I can tell. We
No,
have
no.
a lot of flexibility. So
Yeah.
if the world was in a different spot, if the country was in a different spot, and we truly wanted to be energy dominant, as Congressman Stauber said on the podcast a while back, if we truly wanted to be energy dominant, if our industry had the support, we feel like we could actually grow significantly without actually having to go back to our bank.
Yes.
Of course, this depends on our client mix.
Right. Yep. No, and that's been one thing we talk about is keeping a solid client mix for that reason, right? Is we don't want to be so dependent on one or two or five clients or one area. We want to try to spread it out as things ebb and flow in different areas, different industries, different clients. We want to make sure that we have, a mix that we can continue to work with and support. And
Right.
it's a little bit easier to say no if you're not comfortable with the situation with a specific client or a specific project.
Well,
it's easier
look
to
at us
say no.
yesterday,
Right.
right? In our
Yep.
leadership meeting, we had a project come up and it was out of scope, and we could truly say, no, we don't,
Right.
that's
Yep.
not our
That's-
forte, and
that's-
we're
maybe
not
2
harming.
years down the road would be comfortable with something like that
Yep.
if the industry allowed or if our employee count or employees allowed us to be. But a lot easier to say no when you're a little bit more diversified in different industries and locations. And
Yeah, I think back to those times when we were 100% in the Bakken. Over 60% of our revenue came from one client. And I remember a guy telling me, you'll never survive on that. And I never really understood. And frankly, you know what? In the short term, you absolutely can and you should. Don't get so caught up when you're starting a business about your client mix, because
Right.
you got bills to pay
Right.
and you got boots to tie. Get out there and get her done.
yeah, if that client's willing to write you checks,
Go take them.
go take them.
And I think that was kind of a lesson for me. Like, that person was right, and that little nugget was put in my brain. And then when we hit the downturn, I was like, oh, this is what he's talking about. See, if I had just went out to the Bakken to make a bunch of money and then go home,
Right.
it would have been fine to work for
Right.
one client.
Right.
But when you have a mission to energize America, and you want a team to help you doing that, you can all feel fulfilled and everything that goes into it, then that's where you need a business plan.
Right.
And you need to work the plan. And boy, we find ourselves tempted, even within Wescom, do we not, that we want to get to the end without working the plan.
Right. Right.
And it can be hard to take those steps to work the plan and let the fruits come from
There's
it.
a lot of demand right now. There's a lot of demand for our services right now, and we have a capital plan, which is
Oh boy.
a challenge, right?
Are you going to call
But-
me out on the capital plan right here?
No, I'm not. I'm gonna say we have a capital plan that no matter our client mix and our diversification, we have a capital plan that is supported by our complete total budget, right?
Yep.
So we have to
We have to operate within
we
that.
have to operate within that. Unless we're seeing a huge increase in revenue outside of our plan, then we can adjust our capital plan.
Right, but you've also talked a little bit about this, Chad, that we can't always just go on revenue. We have to go on profitability as well,
Right.
because capital. See, a lot of people, they look at their profit and loss statement and they see that they made $100,000 last year, and so they think, boy, I did great. I got all kinds of money. I can do whatever I want. Right? They don't understand numbers enough to realize that
Right.
capital is not part of your P&L.
Right.
The finance cost of your capital is part
Right,
of
yep.
your P&L,
Yep.
but the actual capital cost is found on your balance sheet.
Right.
And this is another little just thing I've learned over the years, that P&L is everyone's favorite thing to talk about, I think, frankly, because it's more understandable, right, than
Right.
a balance sheet.
Right. Yep.
But the balance sheet is what really matters in the business.
Yeah.
Going back to that equity piece, right?
Right.
And that's where you find your capital.
Right. Yeah, and capital right now has been a challenge as well. Trying
Oh, my.
to forecast our capital. We had 11 trucks on order and have no idea when they're going to show up.
Did we
and
receive 2 of the 11 that
just
we ordered?
just randomly all of a sudden, hey, I have a truck here for you. Like, oh, which one? Where are we sending it? And
Yeah.
so yeah, it's just been, so we have a forecast where we're trying to do our best guess as to when these trucks are going to show up and which ones they're going to replace and who's going to drive them and which location. And
I said something, as COVID was kind of becoming more in the rearview mirror. I told our team, I've been through a couple downturns before, and I feel like I've been through a couple recoveries, but I'll tell you, here's the difference between this one and any of the other ones I've been involved in. Money doesn't buy things anymore.
right.
It just doesn't mean
No.
anything. I don't care how much money we would be willing to offer for a new pickup. There are none. So you're not getting one.
Right. They're for our needs, sometimes they're almost impossible to find. Or we fly to South Carolina and drive them all the way to North Dakota, or
Yeah.
name your spot, right? Buy them in North Dakota and drive them to New Mexico.
Right.
You know,
Well, and didn't you actually challenge our asset team and they pulled through on it? Now we are even not necessarily just going all with the same brand that we
Right.
used to.
Yeah.
And
We
think-
can. We can.
Yeah.
And we changed that financing as well.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Right.
That
with
was
the
another
with
deal.
the same bank, we were dependent on one specific type of vehicle because that was who our financing was aligned through. So we switched that financing to be able to buy any type of vehicle we want, and it's a capped line of credit, and
Yeah.
it's been working well for us as well.
So it's fairly interesting because I came from, I worked in government for a while and I also worked in retail for a little while, and I saw financials and I went to accounting school, and, again, I think that's what brings me back to this whole equity thing. But even financing vehicles under, when I first started at Wescom, I was an employee before, we were able to work out agreements and buy out the other shareholders. But
Right.
at that time, the other shareholders just debt equaled bad, don't you dare touch, right? So we bought all of our vehicles in cash. And when 2015, late 15 downturn hit, and the electrical industry our electricians always lag the downturn. So the downturn will happen 6 months later. We'll feel it
Right.
on the electrical.
Yep.
Our mechanical team will feel it right away.
Yep.
So we kind of started to feel it in the spring, late spring, early summer of 2016. And we had no cash, and we had a bunch of paid for beat up trucks. That was a bad spot to
Right,
be in.
right.
And by the way, we had a bunch of AR that our clients weren't real interested in paying on time.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
With the oil industry being under siege. So that's when I realized, that was another little business nugget that, okay, now I'm not advocating. We are still looking, and I think we still do this, putting 20% down. We amortize them
Yep.
out over 3 years,
Yep.
but try and pay them off in 2.
Yep.
Try and replace when they get to so many miles or if they start having issues. I think that's the important conversation to have,
Right.
and protect your cash.
Right. Yep.
And if we hadn't protected our cash, I don't know that we would have been able to grow like we have.
Right. Yeah, and you explained try to, when they get to a certain amount of miles, try to, replace them. That's, we've figured out this year that has been a challenge as well with the growth we've seen.
Well, we're trying to stay within the CapEx plan.
Right.
The
Yep.
negative thing from that is now what we've seen on maintenance.
Maintenance costs going up.
And that isn't a industry that I really care for anyway.
Right.
The mechanics. I mean, nothing against those
Right.
folks, but I hate unpredictability.
Right.
And there's no predictability when you're bringing a pickup in to the local mechanic.
To get a diagnostic done.
You don't know
Right.
what you're going to incur.
Right.
They don't even know for sure what you're going to incur. They call you and they're like, yeah, Joe, it might be, I don't know, 8,000, 10,000. It's going to be a tranny. Like,
But we can't find one.
yeah, right. And so then 3 weeks later, we're like,
Right.
what? We still have that truck down? That's a
Right.
real bad situation.
Right.
So that's been an interesting deal. But I think that whole financing agreements and debt versus cash is a huge topic that could go. It basically boils down to what's your preference.
Yeah. Well, what are you comfortable with? Yep. How do you want to operate your business? It works both ways,
Yeah.
right? People have been successful both ways.
They really have. And I think for us, we're more after we're a business of a going concern. We want to be around forever.
Right.
And therefore, we're just taking all these business elements and using the best ones for the best result.
Right, right.
And that is that our employees would be able to retire with confidence,
Right.
having a very fulfilled career.
Yeah. In the last 3 weeks, we financed 5 new trucks.
Oh, wow.
So
That's a lot.
Right.
So we're obviously finding trucks now.
we are.
This is good.
Yeah. A couple of them came in out of those ones that we ordered months ago.
Yeah.
And we found a couple other ones.
Yeah, and so 5 trucks for us in our business could, if they're electricians, that's 10 employees. If they're mechanical folks, that's 13, 14 employees, right?
Right.
How could you do that? At the same time, by the way, do you think our AR has about doubled? I was going to do that calculation
Yeah.
before.
Yep. I think so.
In the last 6 months,
Right.
right?
Yep.
So if our AR doubles, and we're talking in the millions, your payroll, this is the thing about life, right? There's only one deadline everyone cares about, and that is payday.
Right.
Someone told me yesterday that, Shane, I would have loved to get that project done, but your deadlines are too constraining. And I told him, well, that's interesting. I bet Lori didn't get away without getting you paid on Thursday.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
That's one that always happens
Yep.
every week.
Yep.
So, but your payroll goes up immediately.
Right.
We seen our payroll last week. We're about hitting our peak today that we hit back in 2019.
Right. Yes.
And although we might not be quite at the same number of employees, we're still down several.
Yep.
But the wages have gone up
They have.
big time.
Yep.
And so our payroll costs, those go up on day one. You don't see that money for 58, 60 days.
Yep. Right.
And you need the truck and the tools.
Yes.
So that's
Yeah,
where these
there's
financing programs.
there's a large investment from the beginning of a new hire for every employee that we don't get a return on that investment, like you said, for almost 60 days.
Yeah. It's a crazy deal, but I think it's the people hear that you're in accounting and you're in finance, and I don't know what you see on people, but they're just kind of like instantly like, oh, boring.
Right.
And it turns out there's nothing boring
No,
about it.
it's not boring at all. It's part of the reason I made the move. Is it's an exciting industry, an exciting time, and there's a lot of moving parts, and it's been a challenge, but it's a welcome challenge. That's what gets you up in the morning and
Yeah.
makes you feel like you had a solid day at work. Is getting over some obstacles and challenges.
Well, talk about impact, Chad. I mean, you guys, we've gotten from all that nasty financing stuff into a nice, clean programs. Our month ends, I'm feeling really, really good about.
Yes.
Every month end, we get better.
Yep.
This month end, we found some equipment rental costs that weren't getting passed through properly. We made some changes there. We had an awesome WIP meeting the other day where some of our team members just didn't understand that WIP
Right.
spreadsheet.
Right.
And in our industry, we're historically a time and material industry.
Yes.
We're moving into a weird deal where bid
Right.
in a lot of spots. And so I've had to go back in my memory bank, and I'm not that smart to begin with, and try and remember what WIP is and how to take your costs to date divided by your costs, or
Right.
your costs incurred divided by your total cost to come up with the finance percent
Right.
complete. And then we start finding out, well, wait a second, we got different profit margins on our labor than we do on our subcontractors. But the month-end process, so for financing, month-end, forecasts were way better.
Right.
We always did a budget.
Yeah.
But you've been instrumental in helping us on cleaning that up. Our budget cycle this year was way more detailed.
Yeah.
And our forecast is getting better. We're getting some cool charts that we're able to share with finance team or with our teams, including our board. But lately, we've been working on KPIs, and
Yeah,
finance
it's
even
been-
gets involved in that.
Right, and it's that's been really cool. I think I explained that last week, how that has helped me, 9 months in, really understand different parts of the business and what those leaders look at for their departments. It's been really, really a cool exercise to see how we can kind of streamline the KPIs, and if all that information is financial information, our leaders, electrical leaders, and they shouldn't have to be putting that stuff together. So it's been cool for us to kind of see their side of the business and how they look at their numbers, and it helps us when we're doing the WIP and our month-end close, and
Yeah.
to understand those parts of the business.
Well, there's the one of the elements of a successful finance team is a team that understands the operations. Because if you don't understand the operations, you're just dumping out numbers. Being a
Right.
librarian, if
Yep.
you don't understand why the book goes on that shelf, it's just not all that fulfilling.
Yeah.
And you don't,
And when I come up with a forecast, it's not me coming up with the forecast. It's working with those field leaders to understand how many people you got and what's your material percentages on these projects, and so that helps. It helps, and it's a challenge bridging the gap between finance and operations. It's been one thing I've tried to work on, was not to speak too much finance and try to make them be able to understand the actual finance perspective, and
Yeah.
on the flip side, me understanding the operations.
well, it's crazy how one set of data in the electrical department can impact the financials at the end,
Right.
right? One set of data from environmental can impact the financials at the end. And we try not to make it about the numbers, and I
Right.
feel like we rarely actually even discuss the numbers
Right.
as a team.
Right.
And it's more about, how are we doing on all these different KPIs, which might be like, hey, what's your team's culture score,
Right.
right? You guys do a weekly survey?
I do that
in your
every week,
department?
a weekly survey that goes out to the team at the end of the day, Friday, and we have our team meeting Tuesday morning, and I pull all that stuff Monday afternoon or Tuesday morning, and if there's trends that I see within the team and low numbers, I go have that conversation, and it's typically so and so is gone. I had to pick up their work, or Monday was a holiday, right?
Oh, those
So
weeks are terrible.
we had to do 5 days worth of work in 4 days, right? We still have to bill all of our clients and within that week, or we try to, right? So it really gives me the mechanism to go sit down with the person and say, hey, why was this a challenge? Or why did you feel like you didn't get the support from leadership,
Right.
on this specific week? Let's have that conversation.
I think that's what I love about our KPIs is they're not what's your profit margin,
Right.
and are you going to be able to retire tomorrow? They're like, how many unread emails in the credit card receipt box is there?
Right.
And then we can trend it.
Right.
And we're like, oh, well,
Yeah,
that's normal that we have.
We threw a dart and said, it has to be this specific number, and let's assess it every quarter and see if that's even realistic. If
Right.
it isn't, let's change it. Let's not make it the goals unrealistic.
No, but we can see if they're going up every week, like,
Right.
oh, hey, time to pay attention here. We might be needing to get some additional help in finance, or we might need a different
Right.
process, or whatever kind
Right.
of conversations
Yep.
we've been able to have about them. Even down to our safety department KPIs, how many safety observations by department were submitted, right? Let's not
Right.
make this just a one area, one field KPI.
Right.
Let's talk about it as a safety team. How are we doing with this? But the challenge I've always had with finance and operations is kind of twofold. One is simplicity, and secondly is data mining. I hate when we talk in just business people, especially finance folks, when we act like our team members out in the field should understand numbers.
Right.
The only numbers they
Right.
care about are on a tape measure, or the size of conduit, or the size of pipe,
Right.
or what size valve, or what PSI, and all these other cool numbers,
Yep.
right? They don't
Yep.
give a flying flute about revenue per hour, or what your widget is, if it's
Right.
people, if it's hours, if it's trucks, right?
Mm-hmm.
So trying to get the simplicity piece of like, okay, what's our widget? So at Wescom, I tell folks, like, it's about hours.
Yeah.
The service, our widget is our people.
Yeah.
And boy, they're worth a lot. And so when they do an hour, that's our product,
Right.
right?
Right.
Is our hourly billings. And if it's a bid job, then it's how many hours you're on a bid.
Sure.
It doesn't matter. Just keep it simple
Yep.
and consistent. And then the other piece is when we talk about trying to make that data mining business, like, oh, these folks in the field should be able to just get that data on. So we kind of went through a huge exercise. Every department came up with every leader came up with some KPIs.
Yep.
And that took us several months to
It
do.
did.
And then all of a sudden that gets all done, and we're in a meeting, and all of a sudden it dawns on me like, oh, wait a second. Bob is mining data. Bill is mining data.
Right.
They're mining
Right.
data. And plus finance is doing all of that anyways.
Right.
So then sat down with you and Tyler, and I'm really excited that you guys were able to like, hey, give us an hour a week. We'll get all this data put together
Right.
and shoved out to everyone. You don't
Yep.
even have to go mine it.
No, and it's stuff we're already pulling. It's just linking these scorecard KPI sheets together and with formulas, and it's kind of like I said, a cool project to be part of, just to understand what everybody else looks at for their areas.
For sure. And the whole point of this, again, is just to drive a gauge on how people are doing so we know where to step in.
Right.
Like when I
Right.
saw, that our AR stuff was falling behind.
Sure.
Okay, that's somewhere I can step in and
Yep.
help possibly,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
If I see that we're falling behind in a different unit of the business, I can maybe step in and help. Although I did realize on Monday morning, according to Terry, I'm not real helpful when I help her out with AR. But I told her I'm still going to try.
Right,
So,
exactly. Yeah. No, there's sometimes we need all the help we can get.
Yeah,
It's-
well,
it's a busy time.
It's funny how that is. You think that you can just pop right back into it and do it because you used to
Right.
do it,
Right.
And the process had changed, and I think I made more of a mess. But
Right.
regardless, she fixed it up nicely for me.
Yep.
So
Yep.
kudos to her.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of going back to the point of folks thinking of finance and accounting being boring. It's actually fascinating how
It is.
much you impact the business.
Right.
And sometimes you have to go find that data or ask the question. But I've always felt like for folks in finance, when you'll really feel like you're being impactful is when you get curious.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you ask questions, and that's the thing I've appreciated about you is you'll ask questions. You're not
Right.
judging,
Right. No,
just asking the question, what's
Yeah.
going on here?
Yeah. And people don't think about the financial impact if they're not directly in finance, right? So that's my
Exactly.
job, is to make sure that we're thinking about not only this new hire, or, but what's the impact that this person is going to have? Are they straight overhead? What's that going to do to our overhead? Something that maybe this person that is working 80 hours a week doesn't think about. They just think about the fact that they need help.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and then we have to challenge ourselves. Is this a temporary thing? Is this a long-term thing? Is this just an issue we're dealing with this month?
Right.
What's the trend here?
Right.
What's your favorite part about your finance role?
I think it's to be connected with. I think it is really to be the voice of finance, but also be on the leadership team to really help drive a lot of the initiatives, but plug finance within it. It's been really cool to work with everybody, and I don't know in the past if some of our leaders have been so involved in a forecast every month, and so it's been really cool to kind of coach them on, here's the impact, and if we do this is what it's really going to do. Is that what we want to present to the leadership team and to the board, or do we want to think about it in a different way? So it's been really, with my experience coming into Wescom, I think it's been something that I've felt like I could really add some value, and I think it's helped. It's
For
come a
sure.
long
And
way.
I've seen, it's pretty cool to see the team be so interested in it.
Yeah. Yep.
It's really helped that connection.
Yep.
Then what's your thought on the board? Should we keep having a board?
Yes, absolutely.
People ask me, why do you have a board, Shane? What's wrong with you?
Yeah, I think there's lots of different reasons. One of the big ones is just accountability, right? And we have people from kind of within the oil and gas industry and within different challenging industries that really come in with some really different perspectives that make us stop dead in our tracks and go, we didn't even think of that, So it's really powerful to have some outsiders come in and really question some of the initiatives we're thinking about, and maybe some items that have already left the station and that
Yeah.
we're like,
Whoops,
Whoops.
pull that train back.
Right. Yeah.
The reason why I say that is just in small business, and I still consider us a small business,
Yeah.
and you typically don't share that kind of information with just random people. And
Right.
sometimes I have a question, is this really worth it? But I know for me, the weeks of the board meetings and the week leading up to it,
Right.
I get pretty
Right.
intense, and I'm trying to figure stuff out, and there's nothing like a meeting to bring accountability. There's
Right. Right.
Some people probably don't need that, but I would just be running
Well,
blind.
you and I looked at the forecast this morning, and it was part of it was, is this something we really want to talk about? Is this real? Are we looking at this the right way? We want to make sure we're 100% accurate, and we have the right context for the board tonight.
Right, and if we didn't have a board, what have we spent that time? We always have other priorities that are hitting us.
Right.
So I think that has been a little secret of Wescom's. I don't know. I can't say we've been successful because I don't know what success looks like, other than to say I've been fulfilled at work.
Right.
And a lot of our guys have told me that. And I think an element of that is because we're forced to stick to a plan, because we have to sit down in front of a group of people once
Right.
a month and explain ourselves.
Right.
So it costs money for us to have a board.
Yeah,
It's not like
absolutely.
they pay us to be on the
Right,
board.
right, yep.
For some reason, people like to be paid for the value they bring.
Right. Right.
But I think it's been a wise investment. I was just, good to get your perspective on
Yeah,
it.
and what we've done recently as well is established, I'll call them these little boards, these teams, right? So we've established this finance team with outsiders. They're employees of Wescom, but they're not within the finance team. They're on this specific team, right? There's an asset team and an operations team and a culture team, and so it's a mix of people from different departments and different locations, and so that's been really cool as well from an accountability perspective and
Yeah.
ideas. And hey, I'm in operations. Did you think about this? When you're looking at your finances, this would help a lot if your finance team started to think about things this way or did this for us.
Yeah.
So that's been really cool as well. As
One of the side benefits of that whole team thing, I was sitting in a review with one of our leaders, and he's like, it's been so fun to learn about safety. I would have never given it a
Right.
rip before.
Right.
So you actually, these employees who want to can stretch their thinking and their leadership journey as well.
Right.
So that's
Yeah.
been really cool.
Yeah.
Well, finance, who would have ever thought we could go for this long?
Right.
Chad?
Exactly.
Thanks for coming in.
Well, thanks for having me.